All right. Everyone, thanks so much for being here today. My name is Maddie. I'm the host of Truth Matters podcast. And today I am joined with guest Prema Gurreri. And we are going to introduce the Buddhist Biohacker Quantum Feminine event that is at the end of this month through talking about Prema's topic for the event, which is balancing the divine masculine and feminine and the sacred wealth code. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to get into our discussion.
I am thrilled to be here with you, and thanks for having me. I'm excited too about a juicy conversation with you.
Right. So tell us more, Prema, about what you do. You're also a Vedic astrologer, which I find really, really fascinating. And I've enjoyed listening to the content that you have on your YouTube channel. And actually, I'm learning a lot. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that. And then introduce us to the sacred wealth code. What does that entail?
Okay, so that's a lot of topics in there. So
It is.
and so that I'm not just a talking head, and let's make this a conversation. So at any time, jump in or I'll pause. Okay.
Perfect.
So I am this whole thing of like, what are you? What do you do? And this is something I do help people with by all means. But it's always a little bit like, what box do you stick yourself in? Your title. Vedic astrology is one of the tools that I use. I'm a Vedic astrologer. I've been one for a long time. It is something near and dear to my heart as a way of looking at using my intuition, my insight, those abilities to look at people's soul blueprint and help them make the connections to what they're feeling, sensing, struggling with, or enjoying, and help them to understand what's going on energetically behind the scenes for them in particular, and energetically what we're all going through, so that you make sense of what your soul is experiencing and you as a human, because we have to walk one foot in either world, are trying to deal with and make sense of. So for me, Vedic astrology has been a great tool to hone in that intuitive ability and use it through that science. It is an art to read it, and everybody's different. I'm not about prediction. I am about helping people to wake up. I am also a consciousness guide / coach. I'm also a business mentor for conscious women visionaries to take what's in their heart, find out what their divine gifts are, and really how do we weave those into something that speaks to us now, and that we can move out into the world with what we're called to make a difference in. So, and with that, I clear people's energies. I'm an energy healer. I do a lot of things. So those of you listening in going, yeah, like, that's always a little bit of a tough question. Like, everyone says you need to know exactly what you are and have this message and niche down. And it's actually something I do help a lot of people who are tuning into their gifts or more on the spiritual side do. But at the same time, I just want to remind any of you, whatever comes out of your mouth, as long as it's connected to your heart in that moment when someone asks you that, is going to be the right answer. That's where we have to let go of all the sort of marketing jargon and all of that. So again, Vedic astrology, I don't use for prediction. I help people to understand their own personal wiring. Because I think one of the biggest values that I can help someone with is understanding this vehicle of you, your soul, and this vehicle of experience that you are in this, in this human dimension as well. Because if we understand, it's like if you have this brand new, beautiful car, like when I got my new car, it's got it's got the computer, it's got all the stuff, and I don't use half of that stuff. I go to the user's manual once in a while when I want to figure out something else that I want to do. Most of the time, I just want to drive it and make sure I can listen to my music and navigate. But the more I understand about it, then I see, there's a lot of other things that it can do for me. And I don't want to be afraid of not being able to understand. So the more we understand about ourselves, the better use we can make of our energy, the less reactive we are to programming, the more we can tell what's mine and what's not mine, which I think is incredibly important, and especially for the feminine, because we are so sensitive, or the feminine side of you, because men have a feminine side as well. That part of us is very empathetic. It's very creative. It's very, it's very sensitive, very intuitive. And that part of us, our circuits can get jammed really easy by all the information or programming coming at us in any given moment. So I'm going to pause there before I go any further.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really like what you said. The more we understand ourselves, and it's not understanding the ego, it's understanding our makeup, the way we're designed by our soul, the way source is expressing through us. So I just wanted to differentiate that as well, because I think in the spiritual community, we work hard maybe to not identify with ourselves. But this goes about understanding our true self even better so that we can just be a more competent human being. Would you agree?
That's a great way to say that.
Yeah.
And, and as you mentioned, ego, the ego's there and has its purpose. And we get a lot of patterns that are in programming that gets lodged in and jams our circuits up from being really who we are early in life. And that's just part of the way the ego works to protect us. And so there's a lot and that's where we get stuck in the shadow. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as in reference to the Sacred Wealth Code, because I do work with archetypes and the shadow side as well as the divine gift side, because the more we understand our shadow, the more we can unlock our gifts, the more we understand what we don't understand or what's not in the light. And the way to dispel the shadow is to bring it into the light. So, and the ego, puts those patterns in place early in life. And most of it we can trace back to sometime early in life. And it's not wrong. It's not bad in that way that it works. It's just that it just gets stuck in time. Now, of course, as you're talking about too, if we're identified with just our egos, just our, who we are, our own thoughts, our own, that's not going to serve, but it does have a place. We need to, being who we truly are, I believe is really, I always say everybody is welcome at the party. All parts of yourself are welcome at the party. And if we can really not push parts of ourselves away, but just really, well, who am I, that's expressing this way? Who am I that's stuck over here? Who am I that wants to fly over here? The more we can do that again, the more we can navigate this amazing being, that we are.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. And again, astrology is an amazing tool to help us navigate that vast being that we are. And you mentioned too how with the divine masculine and feminine energies, how regardless of your gender, regardless if you're male or female, we all have both of those energies. And I'm curious, do you notice, or how do you notice those energies manifest themselves throughout the cosmos when it comes to astrology, when it comes to the planets? Do you notice that masculine and feminine polarity when you're doing readings, even about planet Earth?
Well, okay, that's a whole other rabbit hole. I don't know if you really want to go into.
There's so much I feel like I can ask you.
I'm going to give an answer to that. Okay, because
okay.
Go off on that tangent. In Vedic astrology, in the tradition of Vedic astrology, which came from the Vedas, 6,000 plus year old texts, and people often ask, and I'll just answer this question now, what's different? It's the same planets. It's the sidereal zodiac we call the true placement of the planets. So there's the sidereal zodiac, and then there's the tropical zodiac, same constellation, same sky, same planets, kind of looking at it from a different vantage point and keeping time a little differently. But if you look up in the heavens right now, Mercury is in Virgo. If you look through a telescope, that's where it actually is. It's the true placement of the planets. So having said that, in Vedic astrology, we look at the sky as being feminine and the planets as being masculine. Within each of the planets, though, there are some that are more, Mars is a more masculine planet, Venus is a more feminine planet. So we're going to come down another layer of energy there. But on an overall basis, the sky is feminine, and the planets, they take action, they move, and they are the masculine aspect. The masculine aspect for all of us, and there is the sacred masculine. It's wonderful. We don't need to get away from the masculine. We just need to get more into the sacred masculine. That is the doing energy. It is the action energy. It's the direction energy. And it is, in my belief system, it is consciousness itself. And then we have, the feminine energy, which really is life and movement and flow. And sort of, you could think of nature as being, very much a feminine aspect. So, as we kind of come down in the layers of incarnation and what we're experiencing in this realm, we can look at it differently. But there are definitely constellations that are more feminine than masculine. Right now, we have a lot of planets. So we're doing this on October 13th, 2021. And we have a lot of planets in Virgo, which is a feminine sign. And opposite of that is Pisces, which is another feminine sign. So yeah, there's a lot of movement when it comes, and there's more movement when it comes to the feminine as far as flow. But the masculine is that energy of like of direction. And if we equate that to our society and the way what is valued, what has been valued, and what something I'm taking a stand for, what has been valued is what have you gotten done? What did you do? Productivity. I was just talking to my daughter, and Mars is her ruling planet, and she is a lovely Martian, as I would call her, because she's got a great Venus, and she's got some other great aspects to her, and she's got just a beautiful teacher in the archetype system in her chart, and she's got a beautiful connector. But she was very tired, and she pretty much laid around for the last couple of days, and she's been working really hard, and she's been redoing her house, and she owns her own hair salon, and she's really been putting out and working really hard. And we were talking, she's like, I've got to get over this where I feel like so bad if I didn't get something done yesterday. I said, well, you did self-care, you did nurturing. I just share that with you. That's that example of, like, we're so measured in our culture by what we have done instead of who we're being, what we are, maybe the things that are going on behind the scenes, and that aspect of the masculine is more connected to the ego, right? We would come back to the ego there, and it's more, looking for things that are very quantifiable in results driven. And there's a place for that, absolutely. And I help a lot of people move their mission out into the world, whether it's a business, a book, a foundation, whatever that may be, a podcast, whatever that might be. And so there is an end result, but what's the energy, and are you showing up with all of who you are? And who are you being while you do that? The being is a precursor, as far as alignment goes, as far as I'm concerned, to the actual doing of the thing, because you can do all day long. I've worked with a lot of women, and I'm sure you know a lot of women, and listening out there, I'm sure there's a lot of you, because this was me at one time too, has been very successful, but burned out in doing that, and are afraid of moving their mission out into the world because they don't want to do it in that same way that they burned out before. And there is another way to do it, when you do it from the inside out. And that's what I'm so passionate about. And what does that mean? When you're listening to your intuition, you're tuning into your heart, but then you're coming down to inspired action and taking that one inspired action. That's where I bring the masculine in, because I work on 4 levels that I think are very important. And the reason I work on 4 levels is because that's where my gifts and the way they're wired up. I don't just do readings. I help people. Some people I walk for a year or years with on a very intimate one-to-one level, or I'm in a group type situation, or maybe it's a smaller program, or maybe it's a reading. There's just different ways or maybe somebody reads my book or uses my cards or something. But there's the intuitive insight level, and we're all intuitive at some level. And with that, I use that and just on its own, but I also use it with the Vedic astrology, and then I help people to understand that. And then it comes down to the heart, because this is, to me, really our spiritual center. This is where our wisdom is in our hearts. So the more that we tune into our hearts, the more we can hear our truth, the more we can see where we're blocked, the more we can really hear those heart's desires and know what's true and know what's not true. So that's where I work so hard at staying in, working from myself, and I'm not perfect and I don't do it all the time, but that's why I've created a lot of processes to help with that, because I've been through that. And so then I teach people about how to connect there, because this is what we're sensing and feeling. But then you have this heart desire, and maybe that is to make this big change. Maybe that is, you got a heart's desire to do this, this podcast, and we were just talking, you don't know exactly where it's leading yet, which is wonderful. And when you can give yourself the space to really communicate with your soul on that level and go with it without having to know, because if you're knowing, you're creating something predictable, and then you're creating from the past, and everything we want is unknown. So if we're willing to work with the unknown and get curious about that, but what keeps us from doing that, and that's where we come down sort of to the 3rd chakra area, what bumps us out of our authenticity and our empowerment are the patterns, the blocks that are keeping us from this heart desire that we've gotten. So then we do the energy clearing, or we do processes around that to keep clearing the energy. Just like if you're, the analogy I love is the sport of curling, which is where you roll the big thing and then people just sweep the path on the ice in front of it. So then you just got to keep sweeping the path so that you can roll your heart's desire forward. And then we can come down to some strategic inspired action, but we're going to ask your heart. We're going to look at your chart. We're going to look at timing. We're going to ask your heart what's going on. What is that inspired action? Just the next one I'm being called to take. Not that my mind thinks I should take, but that I'm being called to take. So there's this, and when we take that inspired action, then when I got the inspired action to write my book, your Sacred Wealth Code, Unlock Your Soul Blueprint for Purpose and Prosperity, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for that. But that kept knocking at the door. So what I did was I cleared the beliefs that were in the way and I just took the next step. And I just started writing my ideas down and I took the next step and I took the next step and I took the next step. Then I got help because it's hard to do these things on your own. Yeah. And the feminine is better if we do things together. So then we can take those inspired actions. And what I love about that process is we learn to trust ourselves in that process. And if you can trust yourselves and you can trust your intuitive hits and you can trust and not have to figure it all out beforehand, then that means that you can really be in flow. You can really be in tune with your soul blueprint because every step you take is going to open up a new set of choices. Every step you take. So if you're going to drive from LA to New York and you've got your GPS, you've got your intention, you know where you're going. And there's a lot of different routes. There's the one that gets you right here to there, but you decide to have lunch, you go over here, you visit somebody. And now there's a whole new set of choices depending on what town you're in or whatever. And so there's a lot of different ways to get there. And when we open to that inspired action, that one step at a time and really trust ourselves in that process, I've seen that this happen time and time again with myself and with the people I've had the privilege of working with, is that we pick up the pieces of ourself along the way through the soul challenge you hit, through the people you meet, through the amazing connection, through that struggle that you go through. These things allow us to just gather up parts of ourselves along the way. And that's part of our path to wholeness, which is really, to me, the essential mission here.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Path to wholeness. I really like that. And I love that all of this, everything that you're leading with, it's all, like you said, from the inside out. And that's the opposite of how most of us are taught, in our youth and our childhood. We're taught everything's external validation, but also your achievements. But I think that the ultimate achievement really is that inside, that internal sense of knowing who I am, knowing what I want, knowing what my soul purpose is. So everything that you're teaching and bringing forth is all assisting in that. And I just think that's fantastic. So thank you. It's really, really great. I want to ask you a little bit more about your topic for the Quantum Feminine event specifically. How or in what ways do balancing our masculine and feminine polarities maybe even assist us in harnessing more sacred wealth or harnessing abundance? Is there a correlation in that? How does that play out?
Absolutely. So we've begun to talk about that already in some different ways. Right. And so, let's weave that together a little bit more here. So balancing is a little bit of a misnomer, that word. And so I want to talk about that a little bit more, because when people think of balance, usually you think of things being absolutely even Steven. Everything's like balance. So notice that as you're listening, like, okay, what is balance? What's your definition of balance? So my definition of balance, I actually learned in doing yoga years ago. And Maddie and I were talking, I've been a yoga teacher for many years and had a yoga and healing arts center. That story's in my book as well. And that's really where the Sacred Wealth Code came from, was the fall of all of that. As a lot of beautiful things come from big soul challenges. So balance is actually constant unified movement. So if you're standing in tree pose, for instance, if you're standing on one leg, if you're not absolutely still, there's all these fine movements going on in order to be able to hold that pose. If you are if you're standing like on a teeter-totter, like standing on it, like we used to do as kids, trying to like, can I balance this thing and have it be just straight? Well, you can do these things for just a moment in time usually. And what does it take to do that? A lot of constant unified movement. So that means we have to be very tuned in. So we have that action type energy of the masculine, and we have that more flow, intuitive, more subtle energy of the feminine. And without either doesn't really thrive. Okay. It gets way out of balance. So let's talk about in the analogy, I heard this analogy a long time ago and I love it, that the feminine is the flow of a river. And if you didn't have the banks of the river, and the banks are the masculine, they help guide the river to the ocean. If you didn't have the banks, you would just have water spilling all over the land, right? And it wouldn't necessarily go to its destination. The direction point is the masculine part. Well, those river banks, are they deciding where the flow goes, or is the flow, the feminine, informing the land, the river banks, on how they need to go, because they meander, right? It's not a straight line ever.
Yeah.
So there's this beautiful dance between the masculine and feminine when it is in balance, when it is a better way for me to say this is actually, instead of the word balance, I really should be saying harmonize. When they're harmonized together, when they're working in harmony together, because sometimes we need more of that masculine energy. I was just talking with a dear friend of mine, and she was she's like, I need a book to give my clients because they're just so in the feminine. I got to get them in action, So there's some times where we need to bring in more of that energy, but it's about the harmonizing, the balancing is about understanding both those energies within you, how you express those energies, and especially how your gifts are wired up. Your divine gifts are wired up within those energies, so that you're very clear about, which I also like to call your divine gifts, your superpowers, or your highest value gifts. So you're very clear on what's needed when, so that you know that, oh, this is a time where wow, I'm so burnt out. Okay, I need to get back into that, my great connector archetype, and really connect in with some other women, connect in with the divine, connect in with my heart, listen more to my intuition, or get more creative about things. Or maybe, you've been doing all of that, but nothing's getting done. Or maybe I need to really access my honorable warrior, and let me get into that energy that just wants to get things done. And let's, and get really productive about things. And let me blend those together. Let me get them talking to each other. So it's one thing to talk about these energies and these principles, but what I love about the Sacred Wealth Code is it's a way to really understand what your gifts are, and then to bring it down to a level of like, okay, so I have these different tools, these different superpowers. Which one do I need to pick up right now, so that I can create more harmony, so that I can get to where it is I'm going, but do it in a way that's my own unique way. Otherwise, you're going to be burned out, you're going to be tired, or you're going to be frustrated that you haven't done anything in the direction you've wanted to do it. And you're 3, 5, 8 years down the road, and you're still meditating about it.
Interesting. One question that arises for me is, as we get to know ourselves better and get to know, maybe, like you said, our highest value gifts, I really like that term. If we feel like our life is calling us to maybe pick up an archetype or some sort of energy that we don't naturally use, maybe day to day, what I want to know, just from your experience, do you feel like each and every one of us has every archetype or has access to every energy? Or is it more you were born with these set of gifts and so those are in your toolbox? How do we...
Great question.
Yeah. How do we branch out?
Thanks for asking that.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. Let me explain what the Sacred Wealth Code is as far as the archetypes goes briefly. I've been kind of talking about it here, but now let me just put it. So the Sacred Wealth Code is based on a scientific principle in Vedic astrology that I intuited. That the principle is there, but I intuited my interpretation of it as people had been coming to me for so long about purpose and what do I do and how do what are my gifts and how do I do that? So I was understood after going through a very dark night of my soul that, and I won't go through the whole story, but I'm just going to give it to you in a synopsis here. It is in my book. I had a beautiful healing arts and yoga center that was well ahead of its time. I mean, I was doing shows on the local TV station. I had two beautiful studios, but what I wanted was to stream my classes. Okay, that's what I wanted, but it was before streaming. So I'm dating myself, but that is the reality here. Built a beautiful community. It was a six-figure business. So it was successful in its own ways, but my overhead was way too high. What it took to get into the business was way too high. And because of that, I really felt like I was on purpose, but I was really burned out because I was too much in my masculine in some ways, and I had to let the business go. That's the short version of the story. But in letting that business go, I just really vowed to stay on my knees and figure out what the heck, because I really thought I was on purpose. So this is one of those soul challenges that really led me to so many great things. It led me to totally reorienting how I did things, coming out of the closet as being the intuitive and the astrologer I am. It led me to the Sacred Wealth Code, and eventually led me to the Sacred Wealth Code archetypes. It led me to reorienting my business to becoming really standing in my gifts, and within a few months period of time, being able to really create a very good income for myself. And that has just exponentially grown over the years, and feel so passionate about my mission and purpose in the world, and get to help other people with that. As I was helping people with understand their purpose, because that's what the Sacred Wealth Code is built off, the intersection of purpose and prosperity, and how do they create prosperity, among other things, but this was part of the focus. The Sacred Wealth Code archetypes started to drop in, which was wonderful, because instead of me explaining, okay, like, you're a really great teacher, and within a teacher, you have this ability to take this kind of knowledge and really break it down and disseminate it to this kind of people. I now had a teacher archetype that has a beautiful description. Yes, I help people understand that more deeply, whether it's in a reading, whether it's over a year's period of time or longer, we unpack those things. But each planet came through with 3 archetypes, and the north and south node of the moon each have an archetype. So there are specific archetypes that are your sacred wealth code. And that's what I'm going to be looking at: your purpose and your prosperity plans, how they intersect, and how they're a certain formula, and how they're placed. And then they'll have certain identifiers, because it'll describe what houses they're in. In my book, you can kind of go through a self process around that. But it's one of the reasons that the Sacred Wealth Code Oracle deck arrived. And these are all beautiful hand-painted paintings that I worked with an artist on. And these energies are all within you. All of these energies are, and you can access these energies. To come back to your question, you do have specific gifts that are your superpowers, like are totally your, like, for instance, one of the things that killed me with the yoga center is I have a very strong Saturn. I have a very strong administrator in my chart, but I was doing everything and didn't have people helping me at the level that I should have to be able to grow that business the way it was. And because of that, and that isn't in my Sacred Wealth Code archetypes, it is a very strong gift of mine. I'm a great organizer. I'm a great administrator, but it'll also burn me out. So I have to watch how I use that. So I had to let that go and step out of the shadow of that, because there was aspects about that, and kind of living in that doo-doo land. I was valued for what I do, was connected to that, and some perfectionism and some other really sexy things. But that's what the shadow side is. And so, but you also, and that's one of the things I love about the deck, you also you're like, oh God, I don't even know what I'm going to say, but I really need to communicate. You've got something, say you're coming on to do a show and you're like, but your communicator is your thing. So maybe you connect with the communicator, and maybe you read up on the communicator, and you can really that'll help you to access, because it's written in the soul language. It'll really help you to access that and animate that, so you can really call that energy in. So that's another way that you can use the archetypes, by all means. And then also the other really important way is the backdoor way of, oh, where am I stuck in my shadow? What's showing up? That's not working. Oh, where is that connected? Oh, here I am trying to rescue another client or another man. Oh, honorable warrior. The rescuer is the shadow side. Let me get in and work with that energy. What do I need to release there? Because your gifts are going to be locked up in your shadow in a big way. And what I mean by that is that if you're like, yeah, I know I have this gift, but I can't really use it. Okay, well, where are you stuck in the shadow? So we need to unlock that by doing some clearing processes. First, awareness. Awareness precedes change, and really bringing it in. It's not a bad thing, but it's like a small child you want to get to know and make feel safe again, so it can relax and you can really step into your gifts.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. I feel like there are so many things I could ask you about, but I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying just getting a little more in-depth look at how these processes work. And I also think, I don't know if this is your experience and kind of and seeing this in people, but I think for a lot of people, maybe money or how much wealth they feel that they are deserving of might have to do with self-worth.
Huge,
Obviously, right? And I think that, like you're saying, when we can identify what our gifts are, and then realize, oh, I may not be feeling super, say you need confidence. I may not be feeling super confident right now, but there's a way for me using some of the tools that you've mentioned to access that confident energy or whatever energy that is. I feel like that ties in so much to self-worth and increasing self-worth, but in a really healthy, soul empowered way, which then I think can only increase our abundance.
Absolutely, because that's a whole subject, but it's one I've got several modules on in my programs, because your worthiness is not determined by anything outside of you. Listen to me, it's not. I had to learn this. It's not. It's you get to decide how worthy you are. And one of the big ways to do that, of course, is clearing your energy and understanding your gifts. So if you understand your value, it'll give you, because it's a little bit different, your worthiness and your value. It's kind of slicing hairs here, but when you understand your value or your potential value by really understanding what your gifts are, then you're more willing to clean up your energy around your worthiness, how worthy you feel, because worthiness is more of a feeling. So if you're giving your energy away by having really leaky energy or like say not so good boundaries, you're giving your power away. If you're giving your power away in relationships that don't serve you, in a job that doesn't serve you, if you are not honoring your intuitive sense, or if you're jamming your circuits, maybe you're an empath and you're just too jammed up because you don't know how to protect yourself and not take all that energy on, you're not going to feel you're not going to feel your worth, because you won't have all your energetic currency in present time. The more of your energetic currency you have in present time, the more you can feel and sense your own worthiness. You get to decide on your worthiness. And every time you create an energetic or a real world boundary, let's say, around not giving your power away or not losing your power, really standing behind yourself energetically, you're going to be owning your worth. And when you own your worth and you know your worth, no one is going to know your worth before you do. So if you're waiting for someone else to let you know how much you're worth, the problem is you are an energetic beacon for what you are worth. You are this beacon, and that's what you're projecting out is what's going to come back to you.
I like that.
So if you're projecting, and this, think about you've been around somebody who's just like, whoa, holds their energy, or you've been around somebody who is just, they're just not real, I don't really, their energy just says, I'm not really valuing myself. I don't really think I'm worth that. Or it's kind of a questioning energy. It's kind of feels a little wobbly. Then it doesn't animate that in you to recognize that worth, unless you're someone who's supporting people in that way.
Right. So. That makes a lot of sense. And in hearing all of this and just the ways that, I like what you said, worthiness is a feeling, and all of the ways that these things tie together. I think the more that we see ourselves as worthy and allow that feeling to flourish within us, the more that we're going to see ourselves as sacred, which then just leads me to your sacred wealth. But it really would just be a reflection of how we see ourselves, I think.
Absolutely. And I take a stand for sacred wealth as opposed to just wealth. Okay. And then there's prosperity. So let me just slice those up a little bit
please do.
and untangle that. So the definition that I subscribe to for wealth comes from the roots in Vedic astrology, my understanding, which is everything you need to fulfill your purpose. That's what wealth is. Wealth is you accumulate it, it's more it means your acquisition of it. Okay, so that's your knowledge. It's resources on any level. Yes, it's money, but it's knowledge, it's relationship, sometimes it's things, it's a new learning, it's more connection to yourself. It's sacred wealth. That means it's, again, connected to your wholeness. Money is an energy that's a real this world construct, and it replaces a lot of I want to say a lot of things. We don't barter for a lot of things. So we use it, like you can look around anywhere you are, and there's like, I'm in my house right now. I'm looking out at my beautiful garden, and I bought a lot of the plants for there, and I'm living in a house and property that I bought, all these things, computers in front of me, camera, money was in all these transactions. So we equate money with freedom a lot, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But wealth is what you acquire. Now, your purpose houses in Vedic astrology, there's 3 of them. They're all followed by wealth houses. And there's 3 of those. So it's a natural progression, like that you acquire what you need to fulfill your purpose at different levels and in different ways. And so when you to me, that is sacred wealth. Oh, like, why am I even acquiring this? Because if it's not connected to something meaningful to you, you will not hold it, you will lose it, or you will be miserable in some way. We've seen that. Just look in the media. You've seen that all over the place. And I know you know people personally, maybe even maybe even yourself listening in here. Prosperity is another level here, which is a little bit more about the flow.
Okay.
So how it flows.
Okay.
And then prosperity, again, it is the flow of not necessarily money, but think of it as currency you can use that delivers what it is that you want. Like for me, freedom is really at the core underneath. If I was to say money or prosperity, it's like it gives me freedom. My sacred wealth allows me to really be and do what I'm here for.
I see.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And the only reason those of you listening in can track with this, or Matt, we wouldn't be teasing this apart this way, okay? Because you're like, what are you talking about, Prema? Just let it go. But I'm interested in helping people to really connect with what their sacred wealth is, because it's very different, and depending on how you're wired up and what your soul blueprint is, and it's very different. What's sacred wealth to you, Maddie, might be very different than what it is for me. And if it's for you, somebody listening, having real world things and lots of them, there is nothing wrong with that. Each and every one of us is really wired. Like, I really value transformation, and I attract people who value transformation. I put a high value on that. I also do like having a beautiful home, and I like having land, and I like growing my own food and doing those things. So there's things that are valuable to me. And time. But I have known people who have millions and don't feel wealthy. And I know people who have very little and feel very wealthy, because we can't say, like, for everyone, you need to have this much money, this kind of living situation, this in your life, and then you're going to feel wealthy. It's very unique. And if we honor our own unique wiring for wealth, which the Sacred Wealth Code gives you, then we are not looking at what's being projected at us in the media and the world and saying, oh, I've got to have that in order to be wealthy. Because how many times do you go after something like that, get it, and then you don't feel wealthy? Because it wasn't meant for you. That's a projection. That's a program. And it's fine if it fits you, but if it doesn't, there is nothing wrong with you. And that's why, in the end, that's why I help people go through their wealth dream. And it's in my book as well. My book is full of a lot of processes and things you can play with, and has some resources with it as well. But understanding what's your purpose for wealth, why you even want it, then that connects that piece, like I'm talking about, in your soul blueprint. And then you can weigh things against that. Well, is this going to bring me closer or farther away from that fulfillment that my purpose gives me, or that freedom that it gives me? And then
Mhm.
you can make your personal choices instead of thinking of what you should do or what you need to
Yeah.
do to feel accepted.
It's so interesting, just the different ideas that are fed to us of what it even means to be successful or be wealthy. And it might not even apply to us in the slightest, but that's just what we're taught. And if we don't meet that criteria or look that certain way, then we might not even feel like we amount to much, even if we're actually considerably wealthy. So it's so interesting, those perspectives, and how when we do get to know ourselves better, our individual gifts better as well, we can hone in on what abundance and wealth actually means to us. And then, like we've been talking about, it's actually going to last. It's going to have an impact and be a positive experience instead of, losing it the next month.
Exactly. 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 Then it has meaning. And
Yeah.
purpose is really what our big why is for anything, whether it's our overall
Mhm.
purpose or whether it's our purpose for wealth. And when we know why, then we have deeper meaning. And the soul is always that part of you that's looking that's going to pull you towards, tap on your shoulder or
Mhm.
stop you so that you'll, with a challenge so that you'll look to really have that deeper meaning.
Right.
You have everything and you can feel like, my heart's not just in it,
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Prema, for shedding light on all these things. I feel like I could honestly talk to you for hours. I feel like there's so many different avenues we could take with this, but I feel like this has been a perfect introduction for people to get an understanding for what you're about, and truly the incredible way you have woven astrology and an individual's life and their soul mission with the sacred wealth code and how those work hand in hand. And I think that that's just a really valuable service. So thank you. And again, anyone who's listening, if you feel like this is interesting at all, we encourage you to sign up for the Quantum Feminine Conference. It's taking place October 29th, 30th, and 31st. And we can leave a link to the registration in the show notes if you're interested. So again, thanks for being with us, and thank you, Prema, because that was amazing. So thanks so much.
Totally a pleasure to be here. I could talk to you for a while too.
I know. I'm going to ask
Um,
you. We're going to talk again for sure because I'm very interested. So thanks again for your time and everything.
Thank you.